They called it the American Versailles, a paradise built for the powerful. But behind the glittering walls were lies, obsession, and tragedy the world never saw. One man's dream became a fortress of secrets, where fame, fortune, and fear collided. Tonight, we step inside America's wildest party palace and uncover the secret that brought it all crashing down. We'll explain everything in this video, step by step, don't skip it. In 1919, William Randolph Hearst stood on a wind-swept ridge above the Pacific Ocean, the sea stretching endlessly below, its waves like restless thoughts crashing against the cliffs. He saw not merely land, not merely a hilltop, but a canvas, blank and infinite, waiting for a vision that only he could conjure. The winds tugged at his coat, sharp and cold, as if urging him forward, and he felt the pulse of possibility beneath his feet. This was no ordinary estate. It would become a kingdom, a stage, a monument not only to wealth but to obsession itself. To outsiders, Hearst was a media titan, a man who shaped headlines and wielded power with a delicate, precise hand. But here, on this cliff, far from the cities and the cameras, he became something more enigmatic, more unyielding, a man who measured existence in marble and in sunlight, in the echo of footsteps across vast halls that did not yet exist. Construction began, slowly at first, with a small adobe house that could barely contain the ambitions swelling within Hearst. But his eyes, always restless, scanned further, beyond practicality, beyond reason. He called architects, artists, stonemasons, painters, craftsmen who had honed their skills in the grand palaces of Europe, men and women who could shape stone and tile, wood and glass, into something that would defy time itself. Hearst demanded perfection, but perfection, as he conceived it, was not simply in symmetry or grandeur. It was in detail, in the infinite layering of textures and stories. Every marble slab, every carved staircase, every gilded cornice carried with it a weight, a history borrowed from faraway lands, yet bound to this California cliff as if it had always belonged there. And as work progressed, as the estate began to rise, rumors of impossibility followed the scale of ambition, the relentless pace, the sheer cost. People whispered that Hearst's dreams were larger than the laws of physics, larger than the patience of men. Yet no whisper could sway him, and no obstacle could slow him. The architectural plan was not static. It grew organically, as if the estate itself had a will. One wing led to another. One terrace gave way to a hidden garden. A pool concealed behind towering walls reflected not only the sun, but the eyes of those who watched, silently, the unfolding drama. Hearst studied photographs of European castles, sketches of Renaissance palaces, engravings of Gothic cathedrals. He collected columns, staircases, doorways, sometimes purchasing entire structures piece by piece, dismantling them, shipping them across the Atlantic, and rebuilding them here on the cliff. Yet the greatest collection was not of objects but of ideas, an obsessive accumulation of aesthetics, atmospheres, and ambitions. Each edition altered the rhythm of the estate, changed the path of light across halls that would eventually host kings, movie stars, and the occasional president. And while the world saw only the glamour, only the spectacle of wealth, within these walls there grew a quiet, insistent tension. Men and women labored endlessly, their hands raw, their backs aching, striving to transform impossible vision into reality. The human cost was invisible to the public, yet palpable in the hushed corridors where the builders moved, speaking in low tones, afraid to disrupt the fragile spell being cast in stone. Hearst's obsession was not merely with scale or beauty, but with narrative. Each room told a story. Every staircase carried a purpose beyond its function. A Gothic arch might frame a view of the ocean, or conceal a private corner where secrets could be whispered and agreements sealed. He imagined his guests walking these spaces, feeling the weight of history beneath their feet, sensing the echoes of a past they had never lived yet recognizing its authority. Yet for Hearst, these stories were never complete. Every artifact imported, every ceiling fresco painted, demanded a companion piece, a smaller sculpture, a tapestry, a hidden recess that would answer, complement, or challenge it. He demanded unity across centuries and continents, and in doing so, stretched the patience of even the most gifted artisans. Some left in frustration, others remained, fascinated by the strange intensity of a man who measured time not in hours or days, but in the slow accrual of detail, the careful placement of shadow, the precise weight of a column on the soul of a hall. The castle rose like a living organism, each new element altering the balance, reshaping not only the estate but the people within it. Workmen spoke in whispers of strange occurrences, doors that led nowhere, hidden passages discovered by accident, rooms that seemed to watch those who entered. Hearst himself wandered endlessly, inspecting, questioning, rearranging. He seemed to crave attention between perfection and uncertainty, beauty and anxiety, luxury and unease. Guests who later visited described a sense of awe tinged with a subtle unease, as if the walls themselves remembered the obsession that built them. Some nights, Hearst would pace alone in half-finished rooms, imagining the voices of guests who had yet to arrive, imagining the way laughter would reverberate against marble, imagining the gaze of a world that had never truly measured his ambition. The early years were punctuated by both triumph and frustration. A small group of friends, fellow visionaries and financiers, marveled at the progress, yet some feared Hearst's intensity. One architect confided that he had never met a man so consumed by the idea of legacy, so willing to sacrifice comfort, sanity, and perhaps even morality for a vision of beauty that few could ever fully comprehend. For Hearst, every setback was a challenge, every delay a personal affront. Laborers spoke quietly of long nights, of fires lit in temporary quarters, of illnesses ignored, of a pace that seemed indifferent to human fragility. Yet even within this struggle, there was an almost reverential discipline, a recognition that greatness demanded sacrifice. The estate was not merely stone and glass, it was a testament to human ambition and to the hidden costs of creating something beyond imagination. And as the mansion grew, so too did its secrecy. Hearst was careful, meticulous, guarding both vision and reputation. Outsiders glimpsed only glimpses: a scaffolding here, a crane there, a distant figure silhouetted against the ocean, but the true scale, the full weight of his ambition, remained hidden. Invitations to the hilltop were rare, selective, and the estate became a theater of anticipation as much as construction. Those permitted entry often spoke of dizzying views, of grand halls that seemed endless, of pools reflecting impossible skies. Yet beneath the splendor, beneath the carefully curated appearances, lingered the tension of labor, the quiet anxiety of imperfection, the subtle shadow of obsession. Every addition carried with it a moral and emotional cost, a human price that would never be recorded in the polished photographs destined for magazines or newspapers. Even as the estate neared completion, it remained unfinished, forever evolving. Hearst's ambitions did not stop with bricks and mortar. They extended to gardens, to zoos, to libraries containing thousands of volumes, to private theaters where art, film, and music could be controlled, curated, and consumed according to his taste. Every detail, every decorative flourish, carried with it a quiet insistence. This is not merely wealth, not merely power. This is the imprint of a mind unwilling to compromise, unwilling to rest, unwilling to yield even to the natural limits of time or labor. And so the castle, perched on its cliff above the restless ocean, became both a triumph and a tension, a monument to human ambition, and a reminder of the invisible struggles, the private sacrifices, and the obsessions that lay beneath the glittering surface of opulence, waiting to be discovered by those willing to look beyond the marble and the gold. From the moment one glimpses Hearst Castle from the winding mountain road, it is impossible not to feel the weight of ambition pressing against the horizon, a silhouette of stone and glass that seems to rise from the cliffs like a dream, impossibly real. The first impression is grandeur, yes, but there is also a strange tension, a quiet unease, as if the building itself breathes and watches. Columns rise like sentinels, carved with meticulous devotion by hands that worked through sun and rain and fatigue. Every fluted shaft, a testament to patience and precision. Marble floors, imported from Italy and Spain, gleam under the sun, yet there is a chill beneath their polish, a memory of laborers who bent over the stone for endless hours, shaping beauty at a human cost few could imagine. Hearst's vision was not merely about opulence. It was about crafting a world where every space spoke a language of power, of history, of obsession. The estate sprawls across hundreds of acres, but it is in the details that Hearst's intensity becomes palpable. Staircases wind with deliberate elegance, some broad and sweeping, meant for spectacle, others narrow and hidden, designed for private passage, secret meetings, or quiet contemplation. Each archway is placed with an eye toward rhythm and light, a deliberate choreography of shadows and sunlight. The walls themselves tell stories. Frescoes imported from Europe, once part of centuries-old palaces, depict gods, kings, and mythic figures whose eyes seem to follow intruders who dare to step too close. The ceilings are painted with lavish care, each brushstroke a declaration of the estate's insistence on perfection. Yet the scale of ambition carries its own cost. Artists worked for months in suspended scaffolding, their muscles straining, their lungs filled with dust, driven by the unyielding standard of a man who would not accept anything less than the extraordinary. Pools glimmer in the sun, seemingly effortless in their beauty, yet every tile was set by hand, each stone meticulously leveled, every mosaic placed with an obsessive precision. The Neptune pool is both theater and temptation, a mirror reflecting the sky above and the ambitions of the man who imagined it. At night, lights would illuminate the water, casting shimmering patterns on the walls, creating illusions of depth and infinity. One can almost hear the laughter of guests, their voices mingling with the gentle splash of water. Yet there is a tension beneath the beauty, a subtle reminder that even paradise is crafted, and paradise is never free of labor, expectation, or the weight of control. Gardens stretch outward, terraces unfolding like layers of a living painting. Plants from around the world were imported, carefully acclimated, tended by teams who worked under the relentless scrutiny of gardeners who feared both nature's unpredictability and Hearst's sharp eye. Stone fountains rise like miniature sculptures, each drop of water a metronome in the orchestra of the estate. Paths wind with the precision of a cartographer's vision, guiding visitors past hidden alcoves, secret benches, and small chapels tucked into corners, spaces meant to inspire awe, contemplation, or whispered conspiracies. Every footstep on these grounds was intended to evoke wonder, but wonder is often shadowed by a quiet tension, the knowledge that such perfection is never accidental, never without cost, and never without the watchful presence of its creator. The main halls stretch impossibly, each room a stage, each corridor a story. Columns, staircases, tapestries, and chandeliers are orchestrated with the meticulous attention of a conductor, yet the symphony includes notes of unease. Marble staircases spiral with dizzying grace, echoing with footsteps that have passed long before, the sound amplified, reverberating in a way that both awes and unsettles. Large windows frame the ocean beyond, but their placement is deliberate, calculated to draw the eye, to create a tension between enclosure and infinity, intimacy and spectacle. Every door, every window, every balcony exists in dialogue with the others, a choreography of architecture designed to impress, to dominate, to mesmerize. Yet beneath the beauty lies the quiet knowledge that every addition was paid for in human sweat, expectation, and sometimes exhaustion that bordered on despair. Hearst's obsession with European style extended to objects as well as structure. Entire ceilings, staircases, fireplaces, and doors were shipped across the Atlantic, disassembled and reassembled in this remote California landscape. The scale is dizzying. A single doorway could carry centuries of history, and yet here it is, part of a new narrative, transplanted and recontextualized. Craftsmen worked tirelessly, sometimes living on site for months, often under conditions that tested patience, endurance, and loyalty. The result is mesmerizing. Gothic arches that soar impossibly high, Renaissance frescoes that glow with color, Romanesque courtyards whose symmetry feels both comforting and commanding. Yet each triumph of beauty is also a triumph over human limitation, a silent monument to the labor and tension that rarely finds its place in photographs or public tours. Secret rooms and hidden passageways weave through the estate, an architectural whisper of Hearst's personality. Narrow corridors behind walls, doors concealed by bookshelves, staircases that lead to nowhere, all these speak of a man who craved control, not only over objects and aesthetics but over the very experience of space itself. Guests might marvel at a grand hall, but few understood the labyrinth beneath, the hidden routes that allowed Hearst and his close circle to navigate unseen. It is in these hidden places that tension becomes tangible, where curiosity turns to unease, where beauty and obsession meet in the quiet intimacy of secrecy. Workers murmured of late-night inspections, of Hearst wandering alone with a lantern, measuring, contemplating, envisioning the next addition. These passages are more than architecture. They are extensions of a mind consumed by the interplay of space, power, and perception. The castle's theaters and galleries reveal a similar obsession, a meticulous attention to how art, film, and music might be experienced. Every seat, every sightline, every shadow is calculated to create an emotional journey, an orchestration of awe and intimacy. Yet even in these spaces, the human cost is visible to those who look closely. Scaffolding scars on walls, subtle cracks in plaster, evidence of labor that bent bodies and broke days. Hearst demanded nothing less than immersion, and those who built the theaters understood that their work was not merely functional but narrative, shaping the experience of each guest as much as the materials shaped the space. Every architectural element carries duality, beauty and burden, display and secrecy, perfection and imperfection. Marble and mosaic reflect sunlight and power, while hidden within the walls lie the traces of exhaustion and human striving. Windows frame breathtaking views of the ocean and mountains, yet they also frame the distance between ambition and reality. The estate is both open and closed, intimate and overwhelming, a tension that mirrors the mind of the man who imagined it. As visitors walk the halls, as light falls across pools and terraces, the subtle hum of human history whispers, "This is beauty forged in obsession, wonder sculpted from labor, elegance, balanced precariously atop the sacrifices of many." Even today, the castle stands as both triumph and tension, a place where the grandeur overwhelms, yet the shadows remain. The tactile sensation of hand-carved stone, the dizzying scale of staircases, the delicate orchestration of gardens and water features all speak of a mind that refused compromise, that demanded perfection. Yet within this perfection is unease, the quiet weight of labor, the echoes of human toil, the almost imperceptible trace of sacrifice. The estate is not merely architecture, it is a living testament to the tension between ambition and mortality, between beauty and human limitation, between the dream and the cost of realizing it. Every element whispers of obsession, every corridor hums with labor, every pool and terrace invites both awe and contemplation of the price, exacted to create something so impossibly, achingly perfect. At twilight, Hearst Castle came alive in a way that no blueprint or marble staircase could predict. The Pacific shimmered in the distance, a restless silver mirror to the energy that pulsed through the estate's halls. Chandeliers glittered with hundreds of refracted lights, and the air trembled with the expectation of arrival of guests whose names were whispered in newspapers and who carried with them the weight of fame, ambition, and secrecy. The parties were legendary, though few truly understood what made them unforgettable. They were spectacles of excess, meticulously orchestrated, yet beneath the glitter lay a shadow of obsession, control, and unspoken tension. One could step onto a terrace and see the ocean stretching endlessly, and yet feel the constriction of invisible rules that governed every movement, every glance, every whispered word. Hearst's guests were carefully curated, a living gallery of influence and allure. Hollywood stars, writers, politicians, and tycoons arrived in motorcades, their presence measured and documented, their behavior silently scrutinized. They entered through ornate doors, past halls that had been designed not merely to impress, but to overwhelm, to make the human scale seem insignificant in the face of ambition incarnate. Yet even amidst laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses, there existed a tension few could name, a subtle awareness that the extravagance was both invitation and trap. The estate was a stage, the actors were expected to perform, and the director, a man of immense power and idiosyncratic whims, watched, calculated, and occasionally intervened. The parties themselves were orchestrated with cinematic precision. Gardens were illuminated by hidden lamps. Pools reflected strings of fairy lights as if the stars themselves had descended to join the gathering. Musicians played beneath frescoed ceilings, their melodies both enchanting and insistent, weaving through corridors and rooms where conversations danced between public bravado and private intrigue. Champagne flowed in abundance, crystal glasses catching the light and throwing it back as fractured rainbows across marble floors. The grandeur was intoxicating, yet it carried an undercurrent of anxiety. Staff moved with quiet, constant vigilance, anticipating every need, suppressing every misstep, aware that the slightest disruption could shatter the delicate illusion Hearst had so carefully crafted. It was a theater in which everyone performed, yet the cost of performance was often hidden in exhaustion, quiet fear, and the relentless demand for perfection. Rumors followed these gatherings like shadows. Affairs whispered behind closed doors, promises made and broken in the dimly lit corners of terraces and private chambers. Some guests vanished into hidden wings, emerging hours later with their composure intact, but their secret weighed down with tension. Servants spoke of fleeting arguments, hushed confrontations, and the subtle pressure exerted by a man who controlled not only the environment, but the very narrative of social presence. The drama of the parties was never just in the spectacle, but in what was unspoken, the delicate negotiation of power, reputation, and desire, the silent contracts between those who attended and the mind that orchestrated the event. Each laugh, each toast, each graceful movement across the marble floors carried with it the invisible imprint of expectation and the quiet, almost imperceptible cost of obedience. The estate's architecture itself seemed to participate in the performance. Broad staircases became runways for fashion and status. Terraces framed views that left guests breathless yet subtly confined. Hidden alcoves offered privacy, yet their location was never entirely secret. The castle was simultaneously open and constraining, a stage for grandeur and a labyrinth of control. Guests often remarked that it was easy to feel both exalted and uneasy, as if the walls themselves absorbed energy, measured tension, and reflected it back in subtle, disorienting ways. Hearst moved through this environment with uncanny ease, his presence both magnetizing and intimidating, a man whose gaze could shift the energy of a room with a single observation. Some evenings were marked by whimsy and spectacle, with masquerades that transformed courtyards into otherworldly stages, costumes glittering in the lantern light, faces masked in layers of intrigue and artistry. Yet these nights were not without strain. Staff labored in silence to maintain illusions, replacing candles, adjusting drapery, and ensuring that every detail aligned with Hearst's exacting vision. The illusion of spontaneity required months of preparation, and the invisible toll on those who made the magic possible was rarely acknowledged. Behind the laughter and music, there existed a constant undercurrent of tension, a reminder that beauty and enchantment often carry hidden weight. The brilliance of the spectacle was inseparable from the labor, the anticipation, and the quiet anxiety that accompanied each fleeting moment of delight. Guests' impressions varied between awe and unease. Some left with stories of a paradise forged by genius, while others felt subtly manipulated, as if the castle had a consciousness that measured their worth and then returned a verdict through glances, gestures, and orchestrated spaces. Even the most celebrated actors and influential politicians sensed that beneath the shimmering veneer, something more intricate, more delicate, and more tense was unfolding. The parties were a microcosm of the estate itself. Beauty and obsession intertwined, grandeur inseparable from cost, allure inseparable from control. Everyone who entered became part of the narrative, whether knowingly or not, and no one left untouched by the presence of a man who demanded both admiration and obedience in equal measure. Yet there were nights when the castle's excess intersected with tragedy. Conflicts arose in corners, accusations whispered behind screens of foliage or shadowed archways, tension between guests sometimes erupted, subtle rivalries amplified by the intensity of the environment. Staff sometimes fell ill or faltered under the relentless expectations, and small crises had to be managed quietly, lest the illusion of perfection be broken. And Hearst himself, a man accustomed to command, moved between fascination and frustration, delight and quiet fury, his moods shaping the experience of all present. Guests and workers alike felt the weight of an unseen hand, guiding, measuring, and occasionally punishing, a reminder that grandeur is rarely unburdened by control. The parties were also a theater of human psychology. Every smile, every toast, every clink of glass carried duality, celebration and observation, indulgence and judgment. Some guests thrived, basking in the admiration and the enchantment of the surroundings, while others recoiled, feeling exposed in the labyrinthine elegance of halls designed to impress and manipulate. The estate itself became a mirror, reflecting desires, ambitions, and fears back to those who traversed its corridors. In this sense, the parties were not merely social events. They were orchestrated studies in human behavior, arenas in which beauty, power, secrecy, and tension played out in tandem, producing stories that were whispered for decades but rarely written. Music and performance were central to the experience. Pianists, string quartets, and orchestras were curated not just for entertainment, but for emotional resonance, their melodies interacting with the architecture, echoing in stairwells, floating over terraces, and shaping the very atmosphere of the evening. Every note was part of a larger choreography, every silence part of the orchestration, and just as the music demanded perfection, so too did the people who played, moved, or entertained, their labor hidden beneath a veneer of ease, their anxiety submerged in the expectation of flawless execution. It was a dance of human energy, orchestrated by a man who understood, perhaps better than anyone, the subtle interplay between desire, fear, and awe. Even as dawn approached and the parties faded, the castle held its tension like a living organism, each room steeped in the memory of laughter, whispers, and whispered confrontations. Guests departed into the light of the morning, leaving behind traces of their presence, but the estate retained the imprint of human ambition, indulgence, and obsession. Staff began the quiet, meticulous work of resetting, cleaning, and preparing for the next gathering, aware that the spectacle could never exist without their silent devotion. And Hearst, ever vigilant, walked the corridors alone, imagining the next event, refining the details, measuring the possibilities, ensuring that the delicate balance between beauty and tension would continue to define his kingdom on the cliffs, where the parties would never truly end, and the shadows would never fully disappear. Behind the glittering facade of Hearst Castle, far from the terraces, pools, and grand halls that dazzled the world, there existed another realm, one almost invisible, yet vital to the heartbeat of the estate. Here, in narrow corridors, hidden kitchens, and cramped servant quarters, thousands of hands labored quietly, shaping the grandeur that would define a generation. Each polished floor, each gleaming staircase, each delicate fresco bore the imprint of human effort, an effort that was measured not in wealth or glory, but in exhaustion, precision, and the silent weight of obligation. The workers moved through the estate like shadows, their faces often hidden behind aprons, gloves, and the folds of long-sleeved uniforms, their eyes trained to anticipate needs before they were spoken, their minds cataloging countless details, so that the mansion could appear effortless to those who wandered its halls in awe. Life in the service of Hearst demanded both endurance and subtlety. The kitchens were a world unto themselves, filled with the clatter of copper pots, the hiss of stoves, and the ever-present murmur of cooks and assistants who labored under schedules that rivaled the pulse of the moon. Every meal for a guest, every banquet, every afternoon tea, was a performance of precision, yet the applause was silent, the acknowledgement invisible. Cooks and maids alike knew that a misplaced tray, a smudge on a silver dish, a lapse in timing, could disrupt the illusion Hearst meticulously maintained. The human body and mind were pushed to their limits, yet their labor was rendered invisible beneath the grand narratives of glamour and celebrity. And though exhaustion marked every gesture, there was also pride, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that they were part of creating something extraordinary, a world that would echo across time and memory, even as their own names remained unknown. The castle demanded more than physical labor. It demanded emotional vigilance, Staff were trained to read the moods of both employer and guests, to respond instantly to the subtle cues that indicated approval or disfavor. A smile, a furrowed brow, the slightest shift in posture, these could signal the difference between favor and reprimand. Those who worked closely with Hearst often spoke of the intensity of his attention, of the precision with which he monitored even the smallest details. It was not merely control. It was a form of obsession that filtered through every corner of the estate. Staff became part of a choreography, invisible yet indispensable, their movements syncing to rhythms dictated by ambition, vanity, and a desire for perfection that few could question and fewer still could match. In the gardens, the labor continued under sun and wind, soil and stone. Gardeners tended exotic plants imported from distant continents, adjusting water, sunlight, and nutrients with meticulous care. Paths were raked, fountains cleaned, hedges clipped into precise geometries, each curve an echo of a vision imagined hundreds of miles away in a European palace or a Renaissance fresco. Some nights, these same gardeners returned to their quarters with hands blistered, backs aching, and hearts heavy with the knowledge that their labor would be invisible to all but the most observant eye. Yet even in the fatigue, there was a rhythm, a quiet poetry, a satisfaction in shaping beauty, however fleeting, within a system that demanded both endurance and discretion. Servants' quarters were cramped, shared, and often dimly lit, a stark contrast to the luminous halls they maintained. Here, whispers of exhaustion, longing, and fleeting camaraderie carried through narrow hallways, punctuated by the distant laughter of the elite. Some workers dreamed of escape, of life beyond the estate, yet many remained, drawn by a combination of necessity, loyalty, and the magnetic pull of being part of something unparalleled in ambition and scale. Relationships formed in secrecy, alliances tempered by necessity, and occasional conflicts erupted in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Each decision, each interaction, carried consequences both practical and emotional, as the human web beneath the castle's grandeur was tightly woven, fragile, and indispensable to the estate's operation. There were moments when the tension pierced through even the polished veneer of service. Injuries, illness, and accidents were common, yet privacy, discretion, and duty were demanded above all. A broken bone, a sudden fever, a moment of faltering, each required immediate concealment, adaptation, and repair to ensure that the spectacle above remained uninterrupted. Staff carried burdens unseen, balancing health, fatigue, and fear with a precision rivaling that of the architects, artists, and craftsmen who built the walls themselves. And yet there was resilience, a quiet heroism, as those who labored behind the scenes sustained the illusion of effortless grandeur with grace, skill, and unacknowledged devotion. Among the hidden stories were those of families living within the estate's periphery, children born and raised in the shadow of marble columns, teenagers learning the cadence of discretion, apprentices absorbing skills that would outlive them but never define them publicly. There was knowledge passed in whispers, where to sweep, how to polish, which rooms to enter, and when to vanish. Every gesture, every movement, became part of a code, a language of survival within the world of luxury that depended entirely on their labor. And as the years passed, the estate became a silent archive of human endurance, ingenuity, and quiet suffering. The grand vision above forever intertwined with the intimate, invisible lives of those who made it possible. The castle's interior concealed stories as intricate as its exterior. Hallways held memories of hurried steps, missteps corrected before discovery, stolen glances of understanding between staff who navigated the delicate hierarchy of proximity to power. Furniture polished to brilliance bore fingerprints that were the product of discipline and restraint. Servants moved in a ballet of timing and anticipation, their bodies remembering patterns the way a musician remembers scales. Yet no photograph, no tour, no history book preserved these lives in the same way they preserved the frescoed ceilings or imported staircases. They remained ephemeral, etched in the quiet spaces between grandeur and spectacle, remembered only by those who walked in silence to maintain the mansion's perfection. Even Hearst's closest confidants in service experienced tension that bordered on anxiety. The human cost of sustaining brilliance, of perpetuating opulence, was tangible in the exhaustion of those whose labor was both invisible and indispensable. Yet the estate demanded absolute loyalty. Discretion was paramount. Mistakes were seldom forgiven. The weight of expectation pressed on hands and shoulders, yet also gave rise to ingenuity, resilience, and an understanding of human potential within constraint. Those who endured found themselves bound to the mansion, not by chains, but by the magnetism of purpose, the subtle thrill of contributing to a vision so vast it seemed impossible, yet was made real through their effort. It is in this hidden world that the true emotional depth of Hearst Castle emerges. The grand halls, terraces, and pools are awe-inspiring, yes, but the estate's heartbeat resides in the quiet endurance of the human spirit. Every polished surface, every perfectly aligned tile, every controlled shadow and illuminated fresco was made possible by those whose names were rarely spoken, whose faces were never captured in fame, and whose sacrifices shaped the sensory and emotional impact of the mansion. Their lives, intertwined with ambition, beauty, and the obsessive eye of one man, created a tension both subtle and profound, a silent drama that continues to resonate through the empty halls and echoing corridors. The workers' stories are a testament to the quiet cost of grandeur, a reminder that beauty is rarely effortless, and that human endurance is often the invisible foundation upon which dreams, empires, and legacies are built. Their labor, their sacrifices, and their resilience pulse through every room, every garden, every hall, whispering a narrative that exists alongside opulence, yet remains largely unseen. And it is in the recognition of this tension, of these lives lived behind the curtain of grandeur, that Hearst Castle reveals its most profound truth, that for every moment of awe above, countless hours of devotion, exhaustion, and quiet heroism shaped the very essence of the estate, binding human history and human emotion into the stones themselves. After years of brilliance, after decades of sunlight glinting off marble and crystal, Hearst Castle began to exhale its own exhaustion. The estate, once alive with laughter, music, and the measured footfalls of attendants, grew quieter as the world changed beyond its cliffs. The grandeur remained, breathtaking in its scale, yet the air seemed heavier, charged with the memory of excess and the subtle weight of absence. Corridors that once resonated with orchestrated footsteps now echoed only faintly, carrying with them whispers of labor long ended, of energy dissipated, and of lives that had moved on while the stone and tile remained, unyielding, timeless, yet beginning to show the strain of time. The first signs were small: a crack in a fresco, a tarnish on brass, a pooling of water where gutters once channeled ocean spray perfectly away. To the casual eye, the estate remained magnificent, yet for those who knew its story, it was the beginning of a reckoning between ambition and mortality. Hearst himself grew increasingly distant from the estate as health, politics, and personal obsession shifted elsewhere. The parties dwindled. The gardens no longer danced with the rhythm of celebration. Staff numbers shrank, and those who remained worked with the knowledge that the estate had passed a threshold where beauty alone could not maintain itself. Every hallway, every terrace, every pool now demanded vigilance, a constant negotiation between decay and preservation. Stone eroded slightly under relentless sun and salt-laden winds, mosaics began to loosen, and the very weight of the architecture reminded the caretakers that permanence is an illusion, even in marble. And yet, the human element, the delicate choreography of labor, discipline, and attention remained essential, because the mansion was alive only when nurtured, only when tended, only when treated as both treasure and burden. The decline was subtle, insidious, like a slow exhale across decades. Windows became more opaque, plaster weakened, and the original artisan's touches began to fade beneath layers of dust and time. It was a quiet tragedy, unnoticed by the public but keenly felt by those who understood the invisible labor that had first brought the castle into being. Preservation became a question not only of technique, but of philosophy. How to maintain perfection without erasing history. How to honor ambition without succumbing to modern convenience. How to preserve beauty while acknowledging the cost of its creation. The balance was precarious. Every repair, Every restoration carried with it the risk of altering the intangible spirit of the estate, the essence of Hearst's vision, which was as much psychological and emotional as it was architectural. In the 1,940 seconds, the castle's transition from private kingdom to public landmark began, yet it was fraught with tension. The National Park Service and preservationists assumed stewardship of a mansion that had been designed for whimsy, control, and spectacle, not for accessibility or institutional maintenance. Hallways too narrow for modern equipment, ceilings too high for conventional scaffolding, and delicate mosaics too precious to be disturbed posed daily challenges. Every intervention became a dialogue between the past and the present, between human ambition and natural decay, between the need to preserve and the inevitability of erosion. The estate demanded attention, imagination, and humility, a reminder that grandeur requires guardianship as much as it demands admiration. Preservation efforts were never merely technical. They were psychological, almost spiritual, as caretakers sought to feel the rhythm of the estate, to anticipate where labor might be required before decay manifested visibly. Architects, historians, and artisans worked to decode the intentions embedded in stone, paint, and tile. Every brushstroke repaired, every stone reset, carried with it both fidelity and interpretation, a dance between historical truth and modern necessity. Staff learned to navigate this tension, to honor the invisible contributions of workers long gone, and to preserve the emotional resonance that had always been at the heart of Hearst's vision. The mansion's story was no longer just its own. It belonged to those who remembered, those who interpreted, and those who fought to ensure that time's relentlessness did not erase it entirely. The gardens, too, required reinvention without betrayal. Exotic plants imported decades before had adapted or died. Some species had vanished entirely. New horticulturists had to learn the estate's rhythm, its microclimates, and the memory of past labor. Terraces, pools, and fountains demanded vigilance against weather, drought, and salt-laden winds. Every pruning, every watering, every planting became an act of devotion, a ritual performed with respect for the hands that had shaped these spaces a generation earlier. The tension between past and present manifested in the small details. A hedge trimmed too sharply might betray the intent of a previous gardener. A fountain left idle too long might disrupt the illusion of fluid perfection. Preservation was not just maintenance. It was a meditation on continuity, a negotiation with time itself. Visitors arriving today sense this tension instinctively. The estate appears frozen, suspended between glory and fragility, a world both alive and haunted by the lives that sustained it. Halls are pristine, gardens flourish, and pools shimmer, yet beneath the beauty, one can feel echoes of human strain, whispers of labor that once moved invisibly through the spaces. Every polished surface, every aligned tile, every controlled shadow carries memory. The workmen and women who shaped it, the guests whose laughter and whispers filled it, the vision of a man who demanded perfection without pause. This resonance is the estate's secret pulse, the reminder that grandeur is inseparable from sacrifice, and that beauty without history is hollow. Restoration continues with both reverence and urgency. Conservators document every surface, catalog every piece of furniture, and repair with painstaking fidelity. Cracks are mended, frescoes stabilized, and marble polished, but always with an eye to preserving the invisible stories embedded in the estate's architecture. The work is unending, because time moves faster than any human hand can counter, and because the estate is not merely a collection of stones, wood, and water, but a living testament to ambition, obsession, and human endurance. Preservation is an emotional labor as much as a technical one. It requires empathy, imagination, and patience, a quiet devotion that echoes the original efforts of those who first brought the castle to life. Even as the estate is stabilized, there are reminders of fragility everywhere. Corridors whisper of absence, rooms hold the faint memory of laughter long gone, and terraces catch winds that carry the scent of the ocean as it did a century ago. The mansion, in all its perfection, is a fragile testament to human endeavor. It is a structure built of stone, yes, but also of human expectation, discipline, and obsession. Every crack, Every fading detail, every conservation effort serves as a meditation on the passage of time, on the delicate interplay between memory and decay, on the cost of creating something meant to defy both history and mortality. Even in a mansion as colossal and celebrated as Hearst Castle, there are corners the world rarely sees, spaces whispered about in hushed tones, hidden staircases that twist into shadows, and doors that lead not to marble halls, but to secrets. Visitors often walk the estate and marvel at Neptune Pool, the vast terraces, the frescoed ceilings, yet beneath their feet lies a labyrinth of human ambition, obsessive vision, and private indulgence that few will ever glimpse. Hearst, in his relentless pursuit of grandeur, built more than a house. He built a network of concealment, a palace designed as much for appearance as for the selective shaping of experience. It is a structure of dualities, where beauty and tension, revelation and concealment coexist in deliberate, almost theatrical balance. Some of the most startling features are the hidden rooms, concealed behind walls or within towers, accessible only to those who knew the mansion's intricate choreography. One might walk past a corridor, admiring tapestries or chandeliers, unaware that a simple panel could swing open to reveal a private study, a secret gallery, or a storage room holding priceless antiquities. These spaces were not merely practical, they were intimate theaters of control, allowing Hearst to manage who saw what, when, and how. Guests might marvel at a grand hall, but few were invited to the chambers where treasures were stored, contracts signed, or confidences shared. And in this selective revelation lies the tension that defines the estate. The thrill of discovery, shadowed by the realization that most would never perceive the full scale of ambition contained within its walls. Hearst's fascination with the past extended beyond architecture and art. Entire European ceilings, doors, fireplaces, and staircases were imported, dismantled, and reassembled with obsessive care. Yet many of these acquisitions carried stories of laborers, craftsmen, and artisans whose efforts remain hidden in time. Each stone, each carved cornice, each painted panel was a fragment of human endeavor, transported across continents, layered with history, and reborn in a new context. It is not difficult to imagine the quiet conversations in workshops as artisans debated techniques, worked late into the night, or sighed beneath the weight of impossible precision, knowing that their skill would be immortalized in grandeur, but not in acknowledgement. The castle, in this sense, is a palimpsest of human labor, obsession, and aspiration, with each hidden corner carrying the residue of countless lives devoted to perfection. Standing on the terraces of Hearst Castle, looking out over the endless Pacific, it is impossible not to feel the weight of human ambition pressing against the horizon. The ocean stretches infinitely, restless and indifferent, while the estate rises from the cliff like a monument to imagination, obsession, and the quiet, unacknowledged costs of beauty. It is a place where grandeur is inseparable from tension, where every gleaming staircase, every frescoed ceiling, every marble column whispers of labor, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. Even in silence, the castle speaks, carrying the memories of those who built it, tended it, celebrated within it, and endured under its invisible expectations. One feels both exalted and unnerved, aware that the estate is more than architecture. It is a chronicle of human emotion, desire, and obsession carved in stone and light. Walking through its halls, one can sense the duality at the heart of the estate. There is awe, of course, the kind that takes the breath away, as if the very air has been infused with centuries of artistry. Chandeliers glint, sunlight dances on pools, and gardens unfold with a deliberate rhythm that seems almost unnatural in its perfection. And yet, beneath this beauty lies tension, a subtle reminder that grandeur is never without cost. The polished surfaces are maintained by hands long gone or still unseen, each detail dependent on labor, precision, and the quiet surrender of human energy. Every room is a stage, yet the performance has a hidden audience, those who sacrifice time, comfort, and anonymity to make the spectacle possible. Their stories are etched invisibly into the estate, creating an emotional resonance that lingers even when the corridors are empty. it is impossible to ignore the shadows cast by ambition. William Randolph Hearst's vision was immense, consuming, unyielding. The estate was designed to impress, to dominate, to inspire awe, but it also demanded obedience and conformity from those who brought it to life. Craftsmen, laborers, gardeners, cooks, and servants became part of a vast, invisible network that sustained the illusion. Their toil, often grueling and unacknowledged, is embedded in every detail, yet rarely acknowledged in the glamour that surrounds the mansion. The emotional significance of the castle is inseparable from these human costs, and the tension between beauty and labor, between spectacle and sacrifice, is palpable to anyone who dares to look closely.